ways to begin to sort of further enhance the shaping of the building. We had sort of earlier concept which had a kind of a blunter, edge on the east face of the building, and through further study and also understanding a little better how the apartment layouts wanted to work within, we actually began to round that out and added another facet here to give it a little more shape, and again, just kind of break down the scale, give it a sense of attenuating the verticality, particularly on the end grain of the building. And by adding that facet too, it helps break down the scale of that wall, particularly facing towards the north. Thanks. The next big move was really to think, well, how do you take this wrap and open it up? We have to put windows into the facade. And how do you organize all those windows? And what's interesting is that within the plan there is a variety of different apartment sizes and kind of the frequency in which those rooms are laid out, where those windows want to be. We needed to find a way to organize that and still allow the sense of the density or the thickness of the wall to be legible. And so there's a series of window bands. You can see a little sort of section diagram here. Just shows how big those windows are. They're a good 5 feet tall. It's about 9.5, a little less than 9.5 feet floor to floor for each apartment. And so the first move is to kind of think of the wrap as something you can kind of carve open in a series of bands that reflect all the residential floors next. And then from there to think about, this is a little diagram plan, and it's a little hard to tell, but the bigger apartments that have slightly smaller bedrooms are on the sort of northern side, and they begin to span around the east and towards the west. And then there are these larger studio apartments that are facing the south. And so the frequency of the windows change a bit, and so we wanted to find a way to express that kind of changing rhythm within those bands. And by reconnecting the tissue of the wrap, if you will, with these verticals here, we begin to make that distinction. Thanks. What's also interesting, because of that pattern, it also begins to develop a secondary pattern, almost like a kind of a tapestry weave. You can read this in sort of both directions. And a very interesting visual result comes out of that. There's a sort of helixing or spiraling of these elements that begin to occur because they're offset from each other by about a third each time as it's stepping up. This was pretty interesting for us because this ties to some bigger things that are going on around the island, which is both at the 59th Street Bridge, the big trusses with all those diagonals on them, as well as what's going on in the Colo building too, because they have a strong diagonal truss system internalized in the building. You may recall through the glass you'll see this other kind of diagonal tracery. And so this isn't literally making trusses, but it is reflecting that sort of dynamic quality of the diagonal as it spins around the building and draws your eye to the top. Next. This is just a diagram. It just shows you how much, if you can imagine this, how much insulation would be in the wall itself. We're looking at using a panelized system. So these are prefabricated units, and they can be brought in and erected and lifted up and attached to the facade. So the enclosure of the building will actually go relatively quickly once the concrete frame is up. The outer skin is a certain type of painted metal, which we have a sample of, which we can show you. Then the windows are set back here, and there's a kind of inner layer there, which is a darker glass spandrel element, which we'll show you in a second. Next. Just jumping back to the campus plan, the red arrows actually indicate where all the primary entries to the various buildings are already being planned. Colo is the sort of main entrance here, but there's another entrance coming from the east side too. That was that whole sort of river-to-river idea going right through the building that the architects there wanted to enhance. The main entrance into the fab is right here, which has a strong relationship to Tech Walk as it comes in from the northwest, and a secondary connection also from the riverside. In our case, what's interesting is that this is the entrance here coming in like this. So you come in either direction, both from the classroom buildings, from the Colo building, or from Tech Walk, and come into the building. And the lower plan there, I think, is next. There we go. This is a sort of blow-up showing how the ground plan works in the building. These lobby spaces that I was talking about, which are all situated in the yellow area right here. So this is the lounge space, the sitting lobby here. There's a mailroom on the ground floor, the elevator's there, you go up to the apartments from there. In many respects, a traditional apartment building, the untraditional parts, I think, are the opportunity to create this outdoor terrace deck, which we call a porch, underneath the overhang of the building. And there's a second level which has a small exercise room in it and some other amenity spaces for the students, little study rooms. And then everything that you see in gray in the back here are various support spaces. So the trash recycle and containment rooms are here. Some of the gas meters and water pumps are located there. Bike storage is over here. And so there's different ways that you can get in either side of the building. This is the footprint of the CUP, the Central Utility Plant building, which is right next door, where we actually draw our power directly from our transformers in that building there. Nice. There's a section diagram just showing the building and the number of stories. So it's, let's see if I can get this right, 2 stories down here. We have 22, is that 21, I always get this wrong. 21 stories of repeating apartments running up to this point, and then 2 more stories of family and staff, faculty and staff apartments on the top 2 floors. The apartments are a little bit bigger up there, and then a top floor, just part of the top floor has an interior space, you know, a common room, if you will, for the residents in the building with a small terrace that looks back out over the campus and to the east and to the west. Thanks. These are the materials that we are proposing for the building. It's a little hard to tell, and particularly when you take photographs and try to make slides of it, it doesn't really look like the real thing. So we have some of those here, not all of them, but we were asked to see if we could bring what we had over. So we've already submitted the other materials to the city, so they've got the best ones, but we try to put these together quickly for you. I think the main message in here is 2 things. One, as a design team, we've actually been in pretty intense communication with the other design teams for the other 3 buildings, really, both for the FAB, for the Colo, and the CUP. So the architects have been talking to each other and trying to understand, you know, what's going on with the different ideas of their, you know, colors and materials and all the rest. And so we've been listening to that and thinking about it and how we can begin to reflect a relationship to some of these other buildings. This is the FAB building, has this beautiful sort of patina bronze color as a paint finish in the perforated metal, but also changes color. It looks a little bit like copper, you know, turning green a little bit. You've probably seen this stuff. We have something similar, but not the same color, which I'll show you in a second. And at the same time, you know, the Colo building has more of a very clear and translucent glass that they're working with smaller kind of fins coming off of the skin of the building, which will be in a very soft, warm aluminum, champagne color silver there. And then the CUP is much more of a kind of weathered steel look, a little tougher but really elegant in terms of the kind of the patina characteristic of the steel and the bronze tones that come through there. So that was all very compelling for us as a kind of a starting point to begin to think, how can the tower relate to this kind of these motifs in a way that also makes sense for the buildings. What we're looking at is a type of color, a similar kind of color shifting paint to what the FAB is using, but much more in a warm silver to goldish tone. So it's a much lighter color as the building sort of floats up there. And depending on how you're looking at it, what angle, the color tone of the surface will actually change just optically. Which is really exciting. So it could be more, you know, kind of warm silver here, and then much more champagne color as you're looking up, or depending which way you rotate around the building, and whether you're in the shade side or the sunny side, that kind of thing. So it has a very subtle shift, but we think it's going to be a very dynamic characteristic to the facade. There's some painted louvers here. You haven't seen the rest of the building yet, so I have to sort of point out that now, but I'll come back to that. That's for our air handling equipment. And then we have 2 types of glass. We have a transparent glass with a degree of reflectivity to it, as well as some spandrel glass next to it. I have some samples of those that I can show you, because they're not blue. And then the metal paint color here, which is similar but a little darker bronze than the color that's being used at FAB, and that's where the reveal that runs up the building. Next. So this is also a rendering showing the front porch that we were talking about with the lobby spaces here, and how this all links to the landscape out in front of the teaching garden and the tech walk as it comes in through there. And we're basically using all the same palette materials that have been established by field ops and landscape architects for the campus, so that's going to feel very seamless. Excuse me, and then there's planting at the base of our overlook right here. and some seating down at the corner, at the northeast corner of the campus, as well as the kind of linear seating that rises up gently to the entry point of the building, which is right back around the corner right there. Thanks. These are elevation drawings here. This shows you that kind of banding idea. So the idea is really sort of open up and lighten up the building, and in particular also make it feel as open and sort of a sense of seeing into it, even though some of the windows are actually smaller within those fields. But this pattern allows us to have sort of a series of different rhythms of vision glass in there, but still containing a kind of bigger idea. And this is the entrance right here. This is the west facade. So I was talking before about the sort of trying to change the aspect ratio or kind of break down the edges of the building, and that's what these facets begin to do, so it doesn't remain just as a big flat wall. Thanks. It's a view from the center of the campus towards the entrance, which is right here. This is a diagram of the future executive education center, yet to be designed. Thanks. And this is that aerial view that's been used in other presentations for the campus here. And I think, you know, the main thing to point out is the sort of the tone of the building, the fact that it's also twisted off the, it's not perpendicular to the edge of the island, but it's kind of twisted, 30, 35 degrees or so, which I'm sure will very much heighten the sense of connectivity and visual connection through and past both towards the south from this part of the island, looking through the bridge and beyond, as well as from the campus looking north and getting that, retaining the ability to see the bridge as part of the characteristic of Roosevelt Island. Next. The same picture that we saw before, front porch. Next. There's a view from the south, right on the campus axis. One thing I would point out to you, what we've been able to do is move our building a little further to the east side of the East River, to help promote the idea of a separation between the EEC, the Education Center building here, and this one, in order to help visually ventilate as much as possible these two buildings from each other. Just as these guys are kind of focused around the center and have a certain kind of proximity to them, somewhat compressed on purpose because it's a little bit of a street-like environment in that campus. We're trying to do the opposite, which is open things up a little more. Next. And you can see that here in this view too, which is the prospect of being able to see both the pylons and the girders of the bridge, and be able to see from the north end of Roosevelt Island through to the southern part of the campus. And again, that sort of sense of relationship between these two towers, which is just now being looked at. We're not designing that building, it's just a diagram that's in there right now. So it's always the next person coming along at some point, but I think that's the last slide, is it? Yeah. So that's the concept behind the building, that sense of wrap, opening it up, making the building feel a little more transparent than it actually is, still retaining the strong thermal characteristics that we need to do for the building, giving the residents inside a sense of both connection back out to the city as well as privacy at the same time, and linking the architectural palette, the materials, back to all the other buildings that are being developed on campus. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank